Welcome to the Recover You podcast. I'm Kylene.
And I'm Patrick.
We are a couple in recovery
from sex addiction
and betrayal trauma. Together, we share our story to encourage you on your journey. It's here that we talk about sex addiction, betrayal trauma, mental, emotional, and physical health, faith, and anything and everything needed to recover you to your most authentic self that God created you to be. Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of Recover You. Hello. It is Kylene, and I'm doing another solo episode with you this week. This week, we're going to talk about letting go of our coping mechanisms to live a life of freedom. So Patrick and I often talk about the idea of recovery and the idea of really identifying what's going on with our coping mechanisms and our negative patterns and how to release them. And so I thought I'd give you a really practical application episode of kind of digging into that and helping you think through, why do I do what I don't want to do? And this episode is really for either partner or for any human who sort of wants to think through a pattern in your life or a behavior that you'd like to change. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through two made up scenarios to give you an example of what this looks like and how to think it through, and then how to choose something different that's going to have a deeper answer to the problem for you. So when we think about coping mechanisms, usually a coping mechanism is something that is avoiding, numbing, or distracting us. So we're avoiding uncomfortable emotions or maybe a conversation. We are numbing uncomfortable or overwhelming emotions, or we are distracting ourselves from uncomfortable conversations or emotions that we might be having, or situations, right? We're doing something to escape. It's escapism. Coping mechanisms are a form of escapism. So a lot of common coping mechanisms, and I'm sure there are so many more out there, but I'm just gonna kind of go through a list of like really common ones: sex and masturbation, pornography, food, alcohol, scrolling social media. Those are all really common, right? So a negative coping mechanism, because let's be honest, there are times where I will tell my client, hey, numbing out by watching Netflix all night is not always a bad thing. Like, it's not inherently evil to spend 3 hours watching Netflix when you are actively going through something really, really hard. So it's not that coping mechanisms or numbing out or avoiding is always the wrong decision. Sometimes you need a break. The difference is we want to be conscious of the decisions that we're making. We want to do things with intentionality. If I have a cocktail, that's not inherently wrong. But if I am drinking, 5 cocktails a night because I am stressed, that might be different. Having some chocolate cake after dinner, not a problem. Eating an entire chocolate cake because I am using that as a coping mechanism, right? I'm going to have different emotions about that. Masturbation isn't inherently wrong, but using it to avoid what's going on in my life right now, or, those types of things, or if I feel like I shouldn't be doing it, or I have an agreement with my partner not to, right? All of those things come into play. So negative coping mechanisms are really more about this thing has a negative outcome, and or it's not really fulfilling the actual need I have. It's a false or temporary solution to something deeper. That's what I'm going to say is a common or a negative coping mechanism. So again, certain behaviors don't automatically fall into the category of bad or wrong. It's okay sometimes if we say, hey, I need to kind of zone out for a little bit and scroll social media. That's okay. Like, we all sort of like need a break. But when that becomes something that, I'm not in control of, or I find myself doing it so much that I'm not paying attention to maybe I'm not paying attention to the kids, or I am missing out on some of my other responsibilities, or I'm just noticing like, hey, my brain just doesn't feel as good doing this thing, right? So, I have an agreement with somebody that says I'm not going to do this, and then I do it, right? There's a lot of different ways that inherently neutral things can turn into coping mechanisms that we would deem as negative. There's a lot of reasons that we might put them in the negative category. And so just kind of thinking about that, what in my life am I currently using in a negative way? Or what pattern or behavior would I like to engage less of or not at all? And that's sort of what you can kind of think about when I'm going through some made up scenarios today in today's episode. Think about how you would answer the questions that I'm going to list out. Think about how you might answer them and apply them to your particular situation. So let's think about, how do we actually change patterns that we don't like? How do we stop going to this thing that is giving us something? Well, what we really need to do is identify, what is it that this behavior is offering? What is the problem that it solves? And then once we identify the problem that it solves, we will be able to respond to that problem in a healthier way. So in order to kind of walk through this idea, I want to provide some fake scenarios, and I'm going to walk through the emotions and feelings that someone might have before, during, and after their use of these behaviors, okay? And I want you to maybe think about this for whatever you're dealing with right now. How are you feeling before, during, and after the last time you used whatever your coping mechanism is? So let's start with Joe. So again, please don't think that I have, a client named Joe and a client named Susie. I'm telling their stories. These are made up. These are just examples. So Joe's coping mechanism is masturbation. So I'm going to walk through a story here of what he was feeling before, during, and after. So Joe masturbated last Friday night. He wasn't looking at porn, but he can't seem to stop masturbating. And he goes to his group and he confesses, but he says, well, it just happened. I don't know why I do it. And then I feel guilty afterwards. So his group helps him dig deeper. And this is the conversation that they had. Joe, what were you feeling before you masturbated? And he said, well, I had a stressful day at work. I came home. I thought everything was fine. But after I got ready for bed, I felt lonely and noticed my mind was racing. And now that I'm thinking about it, I did feel some anxiety. And then they replied, how did you feel while you were masturbating? What was going on while you were masturbating? He said, well, my brain became quiet. I had a singular focus. My anxiety calmed down, and I was only thinking about the physical sensations. Okay, so how did you feel afterwards? Well, for about 15 to 20 minutes, I felt calm and relaxed and even a little sleepy. After that, though, my mind started racing again, but this time I was also feeling shame and guilt. So I was feeling all the things that I was feeling before, but this time I felt shame on top of that. So in this example that I just gave, you might have pulled out as you were listening that Joe had feelings of anxiety and stress and perhaps some overwhelm and ruminating thoughts. His coping mechanism was a behavior that had the benefit of calming his anxiety and giving his mind something to focus on. Even if it was just temporary, you notice the way he described that was that his mind was able to calm down and he had one thing to focus on and the anxiety went away. But the outcome was going back to his initial state of stress and anxiety and then having extra layers of guilt layered on top of that. So in this example, the goal would be to find a different behavior that specifically addresses the anxiety and the focus of the mind. So that might look like calling a friend. So being able to talk to someone and have a conversation. So a lot of times we'll talk about interrupting thought patterns, right? So if we are ruminating, what is it that we can do to get out of that thought pattern? Because there is a loop in our mind. What can we do to interrupt the loop, right? And sometimes that's calling a friend. It might be something like listening to his favorite music. Anxiety was a piece of what was happening for him. So maybe some calming music or music that he knows all the words to and he can engage with the music. Again, we're interrupting those thought patterns. Maybe it's taking a supplement like GABA. It's a calming amino acid. A lot of people find that GABA helps them feel calm. And I've used it a lot and I use it with a lot of my clients and people tend to really, really love it for anxiety specifically. So maybe it looks like taking a supplement like GABA and then reading a book. So I'm going to do something both for calming my anxiety, but then I'm also going to do something that engages my mind in a focused way. So the idea here would be discover what are the repetitive feelings that the behavior is managing, and then thinking through some alternative options that offer a solution for that need. So let me give you another example. Susie is navigating betrayal recovery, and she's parenting 2 kids. When her husband comes home at the end of the day, he takes the kids and she discovers that it's become an almost nightly routine to drink 3 glasses of wine before bed. She knows it's not good for her long term, and she wants to only drink when she goes out with friends occasionally. That's the goal she has set for herself. So let's walk through the same kind of conversational process with Susie. Susie, tell me what you're thinking or feeling when your husband comes home. Sure, I often feel a lot of things at once. I'm thankful he's taking the kids, but I'm resentful because we need to talk about things. But I'm too tired and overwhelmed, and all I want to do is get out of the house. So I feel trapped, tired, and frustrated. So I pour myself a glass of wine to relax. Okay, and what does the wine offer you in that moment? Well, it works almost like an anti-anxiety for me. It feels like something I can control, something I can choose and do for myself. While I'm drinking, I feel relaxed. Sometimes, though, if I'm already frustrated, I have noticed it might make me more agitated or more likely to engage in conflict before bed. Okay, and how do you feel after drinking? Well, when I'm drinking, I get really tired, but I've noticed it messes up my sleep. So then I wake up through the night, and I've been doing that more. And when I do wake up at night, I think about all the things I wanted to talk to my husband about, but I can't because he's sleeping now. So it builds more resentment, leading to the same patterns the next day. The next day, again, I feel like overwhelmed and tired. There are things that we haven't had a chance to talk about, and I just feel frustrated. Okay, so in this example, you might have heard that Susie was feeling tired, overwhelmed, and she felt resentful because there were conversations that were not being had. In this case, the replacement might be something like connection and scheduled downtime. So to address the need to escape, she might work with her husband to create a schedule where she gets intentional alone time 1 to 2 times a week. In some cases, that might mean she takes a magnesium bath to get that relaxed feeling to calm and rest at the end of the day. Other times, she might use that to connect with friends and to get out of the house, to be able to kind of go and see people and have conversation and be in a different environment. Additionally, this may be a situation where the couple wants to come up with a way to communicate more frequently so that she doesn't feel like these conversations aren't being had. That's going to be really important in this situation. That she was saying, hey, like I feel like when I wake up, I'm thinking about the conversations that weren't had, and I need the time to kind of relax, but then we're not having the conversation. So how can we figure this out? So that might look like daily check-ins with some structured questions where you know that before bed every night, you guys are going to walk through certain questions or certain conversational topics. Or perhaps that looks like sending him a text during the day, letting him know that there are a couple things you'd like to discuss so that it's on his radar and there's a plan to talk about it after dinner. Or maybe it's 2 to 3 hours each weekend where grandma has the kids and they go to lunch, and you have some more time to talk through things throughout the week. And maybe that means that throughout the week you are communicating, hey, on Saturday I'd like to talk about this. Or maybe you keep some notes in your phone and you say, hey, I have 3 things that I'd really like to work through on Saturday. So in both scenarios, the coping mechanism was offering a temporary solution, but in the long term, it was compounding the problem. So for Joe, acting out temporarily calmed his mind, but then it added guilt and shame. For Susie, drinking temporarily gave her a reprieve, but then it impacted her sleep and bypassed the self-care she really needed. So that made her more tired and overwhelmed and resentful the next day. So while these are just examples, these are common patterns and emotions we may all feel. Changing our patterns means first becoming aware of what they offer us. Then thinking through what may potentially offer a solution to that problem in a way that doesn't harm, but helps. After listening to this episode, maybe you can think through, how was I feeling before? How was I feeling during? And how was I feeling after? And then I would identify any common feelings, emotions, or needs that you were able to pull out through that thought process. And then make a list of what are the things that may actually either interrupt this thought pattern or offer the self-care or respond to that emotion in a way that is healthier. And I would make a list. I would keep the list maybe on your phone or someplace that is really easily accessible. Maybe even tell somebody about it so that you can kind of have some reminders, because a lot of times we go to our coping mechanisms. It's so deeply rooted in our subconscious. We might pour that glass of wine before we even think about it, right? So maybe there needs to be, maybe you put the list or a sticky note on the glass of wine, right? If there's a specific location that you act out, or a specific food, or a specific, maybe it's on your phone where you're scrolling, and there needs to be like a little reminder on your lock screen, for example. Hey, take 5 deep breaths and make a decision, right? Something like that. So I want you to think through, what are the pattern interrupts that you can engage in? What are the self-care tools that can help address the common emotions like anxiety, like overwhelm, like fatigue? What are the things that I can incorporate into my schedule, or into my conversations, or into my self-care, whatever that looks like, to proactively and preemptively address these things? So a lot of times, like, overwhelm is a really good one, right? Overwhelm is like the bucket is tipping over. And so if we can identify earlier in the process that we are starting to get stressed, that we are starting to, the drops of overwhelm have started falling before the bucket actually tips over. If we can identify things sooner, we can begin to say, okay, what do I need to do to support my body? Do I need to talk to a friend right now? Do I need to call somebody and say, hey, can I have lunch with you on Saturday, so that I know that I have some connection time? Do I need to make sure that my husband and I have a long conversation about this thing that is bothering me and making me feel overwhelmed? Like, what are the ways that we can identify the emotion before it becomes untenable? So at the very beginning phases of it, cut it off and address it right away. And then the additional aspect is, what are the responses that are actually nourishing, that are self-care, that are helpful, right? So some of the things that were mentioned in the examples I was giving was like a bath, right? So if the wine is relaxing, but then it is impairing sleep, what else can be relaxing and then improve sleep, as an example? Like an Epsom salt bath is like a great example of that. It's very relaxing. It nourishes the body, and it's going to help someone sleep through the night, right? So just kind of thinking through those things. And then even reframes. I remember I had sort of an unhealthy relationship with food for a long time. And I tried like so many different things when I was younger, the Atkins diet, the South Beach diet, that. It was ridiculous. It was when I started learning about nutrition and food and health and all these kinds of things, when I was like, oh, I had this reframe click in my mind where I thought, oh, I don't have to be restrictive. I can eat whatever I want, whenever I want, as long as it has the right ingredients. So in my mind, it suddenly shifted from, you have to restrict, you have to count calories, you have to do these things, to, if it's something that's nourishing for my body responds to that in a positive way, and it gets the hunger signals right, and it gets the full signals right, and I can eat a brownie that's made with almond flour or chickpeas, or whatever it might be. And if these are real food ingredients, I actually don't have to stress about eating that treat at all. I get to have a treat, right? And so for me, that was like a big reframe. So sometimes if we are stuck in thinking patterns, it can be helpful to think of a reframe for that thing. And sometimes that might be coaching or therapy, or in your group, you can say, hey, I'm having trouble. I'm kind of feeling stuck here. And then people can come from an outside perspective without the same exact filter maybe that we have, and offer us a different perspective or a different way of thinking about something. And sometimes those reframes can really be transformational. I hope this episode has offered some support and food for thought this week. If you need more support navigating situations like this, please feel free to book a connection call. The link is always in the show notes. I love supporting my clients through work like this. And then we can always go a layer deeper as well if we do identify some stuck points or some limiting beliefs or emotional patterns. We can always do some emotional processing work on that as well. But like I said towards the beginning, part of the recovery process, the first phases of it, is bringing into our awareness consciously what is happening subconsciously. And so the steps that I was walking through in today's episode is sort of how we do that. What am I feeling? What is the outcome of this? And what is the problem that this is solving? And bringing that into our awareness is going to be step one. Thanks for listening to today's episode. I do hope that it was helpful. Every day is a new opportunity to choose health and freedom. Make that choice today, and we will see you next week. Woohoo! If you're listening to this, it means you've made it through an entire episode. Part of recovery is spending time engaging in healing and self-growth activities. We are thankful that you chose our podcast to be one of those activities today. Make sure you reward yourself for that accomplishment. If you've enjoyed this episode or this podcast, we would love to hear from you. Please take just a few moments to leave a rating and review, letting us know your experience with Recover You. We not only love hearing how these episodes are helpful, but ratings and reviews help others just like you who are searching for recovery information and support find the podcast too. We can't wait to hear from you. See you next week.